The dealership manager's voice cut through the showroom like a knife. Security, escort this person out before he wastes any more of our time. Mason Reed felt every eye in the luxury automotive gallery turn toward him and his 6-year-old daughter. His calloused hands, stained with years of honest grease and labor, clutched an envelope containing $47,000 in cash. 4 years of skipped meals, 4 years of double shifts, 4 years of sacrifice, and now public humiliation. But as Mason turned to leave, he had no idea that the black executive sedan pulling into the parking lot carried someone who would remember the face of the man who once pulled her from a burning wreck 10 years ago. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And stick around until the end, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Hit that like button and let's begin. The morning had started with hope. Mason Reed woke at 5:47 a.m. to find his daughter Chloe already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor with a crayon drawing spread before her. She'd drawn their rusty pickup truck, every dent and scrape lovingly detailed, next to a large blue rectangle with wheels. "That's the blueberry car, Daddy," she'd announced without looking up. "The one we're getting today." Mason had smiled despite the knot in his stomach. He'd been planning this day for months, running the numbers obsessively, checking and rechecking the balance. $47,000. Enough for a good used luxury SUV with safety ratings that would let him sleep at night. Enough to finally replace the 1997 Dodge pickup that had carried them through the worst years of their lives, but wouldn't survive another winter. Not enough, apparently, to be treated like a human being. Now, at 10:23 a.m., Mason stood in the center of Sterling Prestige Motors with his daughter's small hand gripping his calloused palm and felt the familiar weight of being invisible. Worse than invisible. Visible in all the wrong ways. The showroom was a cathedral of chrome and glass. October sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the curves of vehicles that cost more than most people earned in 3 years. The floor was polished marble. The air smelled like leather and money. Everywhere Mason looked, he saw people who belonged. Men in tailored suits examining dashboard features. Women in designer heels discussing paint finishes. Sales associates in crisp uniforms gliding between customers with tablets and bright smiles. No one had smiled at Mason. He'd known this would happen. Had prepared himself for it even. That morning, he'd put on his cleanest jeans, the ones without paint stains, and the button-down shirt he saved for parent-teacher conferences. He'd scrubbed the perpetual grease from beneath his fingernails until his fingers ached. He'd combed his hair, shaved carefully, done everything he could to look presentable. But there was only so much presentation could hide. The shirt was 5 years old. The jeans were Walmart. His work boots, the only shoes he owned, had steel toes and worn heels. And his hands, no matter how hard he scrubbed, still carried the evidence of honest labor in every crease and scar. Chloe didn't notice. She was 6 years old and saw the world as it should be, not as it was. Right now, she was practically vibrating with excitement, tugging at his hand and pointing at every blue vehicle in sight. "Is that one blueberry, Daddy?" "That's more like sky blue, sweet pea." "What about that one?" "That's called teal, I think." Teal's not a flavor of blueberry. Mason felt his chest tighten with something that might have been love, or might have been grief, or might have been both. Sarah would have loved this moment, would have matched Chloe's excitement, inventing elaborate stories about each vehicle, turning the whole thing into an adventure. But Sarah had been gone for 4 years, 3 months, and 17 days. "Excuse me." Mason turned to find a young sales associate, maybe 25, hair gelled into deliberate messiness, suit probably worth more than Mason's entire month's rent, looking past him toward a couple examining a silver sedan. "I need to get through," the associate said, not making eye contact. Mason stepped aside, pulling Chloe with him. They'd been in the showroom for 11 minutes, and 3 different salespeople had walked past them without acknowledgement. Mason had tried to make eye contact, tried to signal that he was a serious customer, but each time he'd been met with either disinterest or barely concealed assessment that found him lacking. He understood the mathematics of it. Salespeople worked on commission. They had to prioritize customers who looked likely to buy. And Mason didn't look likely to buy anything more expensive than the coffee in the waiting area. Understanding it didn't make it feel any better. "Daddy, look, that one's perfect." Chloe was pointing at an SUV near the back of the showroom, a deep sapphire blue that caught the light like water. Even from a distance, Mason could see it was beautiful. Sleek lines, substantial frame, the kind of vehicle that would keep his daughter safe in a collision. The kind of vehicle that was almost certainly out of his price range. "Let's go look," he said anyway. They wove between other customers and gleaming vehicles until they stood before the SUV. The window sticker listed features Mason only half understood. Adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane departure warning, automatic emergency braking. The price was listed at the bottom, $54,900. Too much. Way too much. "Can I sit inside?" Chloe asked, already reaching for the door handle. "I don't think we should—" "Go ahead, sweetie," a voice said. Mason turned to find a woman in her 50s, dressed in the dealership's uniform of black slacks and white blouse, smiling at Chloe. Her name tag read Patricia, sales associate. Finally. Someone who acknowledged they existed. "Are you sure?" Mason asked. "We don't want to—" "It's fine, that's what they're here for." Patricia opened the rear door for Chloe, who scrambled inside with a delighted squeal. "This is exactly like a blueberry," Chloe announced, running her hands over the leather seats. Patricia smiled indulgently, then turned to Mason. Her smile dimmed slightly, becoming more professional. "First time shopping for a luxury vehicle?" "First time shopping for anything this nice," Mason admitted. "I've been saving for a while." "I see. Well, this particular model is one of our premium options. It's got every safety feature you could want, exceptional reliability ratings, and—" "How much could you come down on the price?" Patricia's smile froze. "I'm sorry? The sticker says $54,900. I have $47,000 cash. Could you meet me somewhere in the middle?" The temperature in their small corner of the showroom seemed to drop several degrees. "Sir," Patricia said carefully, "this is a luxury dealership. We don't typically negotiate down $7,000. I figured it was worth asking. Mason tried to keep his tone light, friendly. "I'm a cash buyer. No financing, no complications. That's got to be worth something." Patricia glanced over her shoulder, then back at Mason. Something in her expression had shifted. "Where exactly did you say you worked?" "I didn't, but I'm a mechanic. Neighborhood garage over on Elm Street." "I see." Patricia's professional mask was firmly in place now. "And you're looking to purchase this vehicle today?" "If we can work out the numbers, yes, ma'am." "With cash?" "Yes, ma'am." $47,000 in cash. Mason felt heat rising in his face. He knew what she was implying, knew exactly where her mind had gone. "I've been saving for 4 years," he said quietly. "Every overtime shift, every extra job. It's all documented and legal if that's what you're asking." Patricia had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I wasn't suggesting Daddy, there's a screen that plays movies," Chloe's voice carried from inside the SUV, oblivious to the tension. "That's wonderful, sweet pea." Patricia straightened her shoulders. "Why don't I get my manager? He'll be able to discuss pricing options with you." She walked away before Mason could respond. Mason closed his eyes briefly, counted to 10, reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about his pride. This was about Chloe, about keeping her safe, about finally being able to provide something better than the minimum. "Mr. Reed?" Mason opened his eyes to find a man in his early 40s, salt and pepper hair styled precisely, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Mason's car. His name tag identified him as Richard Thornton, sales manager. "That's me," Mason said, extending his hand. Thornton looked at the offered hand for a fraction of a second too long before shaking it briefly. "Patricia tells me you're interested in the Navigator." "If the price is right, yes, sir." Thornton glanced at the SUV where Chloe was now pretending to drive, making engine noises. "It's quite a vehicle, top of the line, perhaps more than you're looking for?" "It's exactly what I'm looking for. Safe, reliable, good, in bad weather." "Of course. And Patricia mentioned you're paying cash?" Here we go again, Mason thought. "Yes, sir. I have $47,000. I know the sticker is higher, but I was hoping we could work something out." Thornton's laugh was brief and sharp. "Work something out? I see." He pulled out his phone, tapped something, then looked back at Mason. "You said you're a mechanic?" "Yes, sir." "At a neighborhood garage?" "Reed's Automotive on Elm." "Never heard of it." "We mostly do local work, Regular maintenance, some repairs. Thornton nodded slowly, his eyes traveling from Mason's work boots up to his 5-year-old shirt. And in 4 years of working at this garage, you've saved $47,000. The way he said it made it sound impossible, made it sound like a lie. I work a lot of overtime, Mason said, and I don't spend much on myself. Clearly, Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Mason felt something cold settling in his chest. He recognized the look on Thornton's face, had seen it before, in different contexts throughout his life. The look that said, I've already decided who you are, and nothing you say will change it. Daddy, can we get it? Please. Chloe had climbed out of the SUV and was bouncing on her toes, her small face bright with hope. We're still talking about it, Sweet Pea, Mason said gently. Thornton looked down at Chloe with the kind of smile adults gave children they found vaguely annoying. It's a big purchase. Your daddy needs to think very carefully about whether he can really afford it. He has the money, Chloe said with 6-year-old certainty. He's been saving forever. He doesn't even buy himself lunch anymore. Mason's throat tightened. Chloe, is that true? Thornton asked, his tone falsely sympathetic. Skipping lunch to save money? I eat at home, Mason said quietly. Right, of course. Thornton crossed his arms. Mr. Reed, I'm going to be straight with you. This dealership caters to a specific clientele. People who can afford premium vehicles without having to skip meals or work overtime for 4 years. People who view a $50,000 purchase as, well, as routine. The showroom had grown quieter. Or maybe it just felt that way to Mason. He could feel eyes on them now. Other customers, other salespeople, watching. I have the money, Mason said, keeping his voice level. Legal, documented money. I'm prepared to make a cash offer today. An offer $7,000 below asking price. A starting point for negotiation. Thornton's smile was condescending. Mr. Reed, we don't negotiate $7,000 off premium vehicles with people who... He caught himself, recalibrated. Let me ask you something. What do you drive now? Mason knew where this was going. A 1997 Dodge pickup. And where is this pickup? In your parking lot. The rusty red one? With the dented tailgate. Mason's jaw tightened. Yes. Thornton nodded as if Mason had just confirmed something important. Mr. Reed, that truck is worth maybe $800, probably less. You're telling me you've driven that vehicle for years, worked as a mechanic at a no-name garage, and somehow saved $47,000 in cash. Yes. Forgive me for being skeptical. The cold in Mason's chest was spreading. You're calling me a liar. I'm saying the math doesn't add up. I'm saying that in my 15 years of automotive sales, I've learned to recognize serious buyers. And I'm saying, Thornton gestured vaguely at Mason's clothes, his boots, his entire existence. This doesn't look serious. Chloe had stopped bouncing. She was looking between Mason and Thornton with growing confusion, sensing something wrong, even if she couldn't articulate it. Mason took a slow breath. I'd like to speak with the owner. The owner of Sterling Prestige Motors? Yes. Thornton's laugh was genuine this time. Mr. Reed, the owner of this dealership is one of the wealthiest women in the country. She doesn't involve herself in individual sales. Then I'd like to make a formal complaint. About what exactly? About being treated like a criminal for having the audacity to shop here while looking poor. The words came out harder than Mason intended. Several nearby conversations had stopped entirely now. A couple examining a sedan was openly staring. A sales associate had paused mid-pitch to watch. Thornton's professional mask cracked slightly, showing irritation beneath. Mr. Reed, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm a paying customer. You're a disruption. You've made accusations, caused a scene. I've stood here trying to buy a car while being treated like trash. Security. Thornton didn't raise his voice, but somehow it carried. A man in a security uniform appeared from somewhere near the entrance. Mason felt the world tilting. This couldn't be happening. Not after 4 years, not after everything. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to exit the premises, the security guard said. He was young, looked uncomfortable. I have money, Mason said, hating how desperate he sounded. I have $47,000 in cash. I just want to buy a safe car for my daughter. Sir, please. Thornton stepped forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which made it worse somehow. Mr. Reed, I understand you've worked hard. I'm sure you have. But this isn't the right dealership for you. There are plenty of good used car lots that would be happy to work with your budget. Places more appropriate. Appropriate. The word hung in the air like poison. Mason looked at Chloe. Her eyes were huge, filling with tears she didn't understand. She knew something bad was happening, knew they were leaving without the blueberry car, knew, in whatever way 6-year-olds understand these things, that her father was being hurt. Okay, Mason said quietly. We'll go. He took Chloe's hand. It was trembling. I'm sorry, Sweet Pea, he whispered. They walked toward the exit. The showroom had gone silent except for the click of Mason's boots on marble. Every step felt like it took an hour. Every eye felt like a weight. They were 10 feet from the door when Chloe started crying. Not loud, just small broken sounds that shattered what was left of Mason's composure. It's okay, baby. We'll find something else. Somewhere else. Why were they so mean? I don't know. You have the money. You showed them. I know. So why? I don't know, Chloe. I don't know. They pushed through the glass doors into autumn sunlight. The parking lot stretched before them, full of expensive cars belonging to people who fit. And there, near the back, sat Mason's truck. Rusty, dented, honest. Mason was fumbling for his keys when he heard it. The sound of a car engine. Expensive, powerful, purring like a sleeping predator. A black executive sedan, something European and sleek, was pulling into the parking lot. It moved with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of precision engineering and unlimited budget. Mason barely noticed. He was focused on getting Chloe into the truck, getting away before she saw him break down completely. But then the sedan stopped. Not in a parking spot, right in the middle of the lot, blocking traffic. The driver's door opened, and the woman who stepped out looked directly at Mason's rusty pickup truck with an expression of absolute shock. She was maybe 30, dressed in a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Mason's entire wardrobe combined. Dark hair pulled back severely, the kind of face fashion magazines put on covers, beautiful in a sharp, intimidating way. Everything about her screamed power and control. Everything except her expression right now, which was complete disbelief. She stood frozen beside her car, staring at the pickup truck like she'd seen a ghost. Mason paused with his hand on Chloe's car seat, confused. The woman wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the truck. At the dented red paint, the cracked windshield, the rust spots he'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Then her eyes shifted to Mason, and recognition hit her face like lightning. She started walking toward them, fast. Her heels clicked against pavement with military precision. "Wait!" she called out. Her voice carried authority like some people carried weapons. "Wait, please!" Mason's first instinct was to get in the truck and drive away. He'd had enough humiliation for one day, but something in the woman's voice stopped him. Not authority, something underneath it, desperation. She reached them slightly out of breath, which seemed impossible given she'd only walked 30 feet. "It's you," she said. Mason had no idea what to say to that. "I'm sorry?" "The truck. I'd recognize it anywhere. The dent on the driver's side door, the crack in the windshield. It's the same one." "Ma'am, I think you might have me confused with 10 years ago, January, there was a snowstorm, Highway 52. Mason felt the world stop spinning. The woman's eyes were searching his face frantically. "You pulled me out. My car went off the road, caught fire. You stopped, broke the window, got me out. The police said if you'd been 30 seconds later..." Her voice cracked slightly. "You disappeared before anyone could thank you." Mason remembered. Of course he remembered. You didn't forget something like that. The storm had been brutal, one of those January monsters that turned highways into ice rinks. He'd been driving home from a job interview, the interview that would have changed everything, before Sarah got her diagnosis, and everything changed anyway. He'd seen the car go over the embankment, hadn't even thought about it, just stopped his truck and ran down the slope. The woman inside had been unconscious, blood running down her face, and the engine had been smoking in that way that meant bad things were about to happen. He'd broken the window with a tire iron, pulled her out, carried her up to the road just as the car's interior had ignited. The ambulance had arrived. The police. News vans, somehow, even in the storm. Mason had given a quick statement and left. He'd been late for Sarah's evening medication, and nothing, not recognition, not thanks, not news cameras, mattered more than that. "I remember," Mason said quietly. "Are you okay? Did you? I've been looking for you for 10 years. The intensity in her voice made Chloe press closer to Mason's leg. You didn't need to do that. Anyone would have. No. The woman shook her head firmly. Not anyone. Most people would have driven past. It was a terrible storm. You risked your life. I just did what needed doing. The woman laughed, but it sounded like she might cry. What needed doing? You saved my life like you were taking out the garbage. She seemed to collect herself, straightening slightly. My name is Scarlett Vale. The name hit Mason like a punch. Even someone who lived in a tiny apartment with a 6-year-old and worked 80-hour weeks, knew that name. Scarlett Vale, CEO of Vale Automotive, Billionaire. One of the most powerful people in the industry, the kind of person who appeared in Forbes articles and gave TED Talks. The kind of person who owned this dealership, and probably 50 others. "Oh," Mason said stupidly. Scarlett's eyes moved from Mason to Chloe to the dealership entrance, and something in her expression shifted, hardened. "What were you doing inside?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "We were shopping," Chloe said in a small voice, "for a blueberry car, but they said we had to leave." Scarlett went very still. "They made you leave?" "It was a misunderstanding," Mason said quickly. He didn't want to cause trouble, didn't want to turn his humiliation into some kind of scene. "We should go, I'm sure you're busy." "Tell me exactly what happened." It wasn't a request. Mason hesitated, but there was something in Scarlett's eyes that said lying would be worse than the truth. So he told her. The ignored greetings, Patricia's suspicion, Thornton's condescension, the security guard, the whole humiliating sequence. With each sentence, Scarlett's expression grew colder. Not angry. Worse than angry. The kind of controlled fury that people who actually had power learned to wield precisely. When Mason finished, Scarlett was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "This is Scarlett Vale," she said when someone answered. "I'm standing in the parking lot of Sterling Prestige Motors. In approximately 3 minutes, I'm going to walk inside. I want the complete security footage from the last hour transferred to my phone before I reach the door. I want Richard Thornton in the main showroom, and I want every staff member on duty assembled." She paused. "No, not tomorrow. Now." She ended the call and looked at Mason. "Come with me," she said. "Ma'am, really, it's not necessary." "Mr. Reed." Her voice was gentle but absolute. "For 10 years, I've wanted to repay what you did for me. You wouldn't accept money. You wouldn't accept recognition. You wouldn't accept anything. So please, let me do this one small thing. Let me fix what just happened to you." Mason looked at Chloe. She was staring at Scarlett with wide eyes. "Is she a superhero?" Chloe whispered. Despite everything, Mason almost smiled. "Something like that." "Okay," he said to Scarlett, "but I don't want anyone fired. People make mistakes." Scarlett's expression didn't change. "We'll see." She walked toward the dealership entrance, and after a moment's hesitation, Mason followed with Chloe's hand in his. The automatic doors opened, and Mason Reed, who had been escorted out of Sterling Prestige Motors 15 minutes earlier, walked back inside with the owner of the entire company. The effect was immediate and electric. Every head turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Richard Thornton, who had been talking with a couple near a luxury sedan, froze when he saw Scarlett. And when he saw Mason beside her, the color drained from his face. Scarlett Vale moved through the showroom like winter itself had taken human form. Her heels struck the marble floor with rhythmic precision, each step a countdown to something inevitable. Mason followed a few paces behind, Chloe's hand still gripped in his, feeling like he'd accidentally wandered onto a stage mid-performance without knowing his lines. The assembled staff stood in a loose semicircle near the center of the showroom. Mason counted maybe 15 people. Sales associates, administrative staff, the security guard who'd asked him to leave. All of them looked confused. Most looked nervous. Richard Thornton looked like he was watching his career flash before his eyes. "Ms. Vale," Thornton began, stepping forward with a smile that didn't quite work. This is an unexpected pleasure. We didn't know you were coming today, or we would have— Be quiet, Richard. The words were soft, but they cut through the air like a blade. Thornton's mouth closed with an audible click. Scarlett stopped at the middle of the semicircle and turned slowly, making eye contact with each staff member. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the showroom despite its moderate volume. 45 minutes ago, a customer entered this dealership with his daughter. A man who drove here in an old pickup truck, wearing work clothes, carrying cash. Can anyone tell me what happened to that customer? Silence. The kind that pressed down on everyone present. No volunteers? Scarlett pulled out her phone, tapped it once. Then let me tell you what the security footage shows. It shows this man— She gestured toward Mason without looking at him, being ignored by 4 different sales associates. It shows him being questioned about the legitimacy of his money. It shows him being mocked for his vehicle, his profession, and his appearance. And it shows him being removed from the premises by security. Patricia, the sales associate who'd first approached them, had gone pale. The security guard was staring at his shoes. Ms. Vale, Thornton tried again. If you'd let me explain the situation— The situation? Scarlett's eyes locked onto him. Please, explain the situation where my staff judges customers by their clothing instead of their intentions. Explain the situation where a man with $47,000 in cash is treated like a criminal. I'm very interested in this explanation. Thornton's throat worked. We have to be careful, you know that. There have been incidents. People who come in claiming to have money, wasting our time. Wasting your time? Scarlett repeated the words like they tasted rotten. This man came here to purchase a $50,000 vehicle with cash, and you considered him a waste of time. We didn't know he was legitimate, so you assumed he wasn't. Based on what exactly? Thornton's eyes flickered to Mason, to his work boots and faded jeans, and Scarlett caught it. I see, she said quietly. Based on appearance. Based on the kind of judgment that violates every principle this company claims to stand for. She turned to address the full group again. Does anyone else want to defend this? Anyone want to explain why we're in the business of humiliating paying customers? More silence. A few people were looking at Mason now, and he could see recognition dawning. Horror in some cases. They were realizing exactly who they'd turned away. Chloe tugged on Mason's hand. Daddy, why is everyone so quiet? They're listening, Sweet Pea, Mason murmured. Scarlett's expression softened fractionally when she glanced at Chloe. Then it hardened again as she turned back to Thornton. Richard, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Thornton's face went from pale to red. You can't. I've been with this company for 15 years. And in 15 years you learn nothing about dignity or respect. Leave. This is insane. Over one customer, one— He stopped himself, but not before everyone heard what he'd almost said. One what? Scarlett's voice dropped to something dangerous. Finish that sentence, Richard. I'd love to hear it. Thornton's jaw worked silently. The security guard, the same one who'd asked Mason to leave, stepped forward reluctantly. Mr. Thornton, if you'll come with me. This isn't over, Thornton said, looking at Scarlett. You can't run a business on emotions. Sometimes you have to make judgment calls. You're right, Scarlett said. I am making a judgment call about you. Now get out of my building. Mason watched Thornton walk toward the exit, shoulders rigid with anger. Part of him felt bad. He'd meant it when he said he didn't want anyone fired. But another part, the part that had stood here 20 minutes ago feeling like dirt, couldn't quite muster sympathy. When the doors closed behind Thornton, Scarlett turned to Patricia. You approached them first. What happened? Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. He asked about negotiating the price down $7,000. It seemed like— I thought— You thought what? That he might not be serious, that he might be— Patricia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Testing us or something. Testing you. People do that sometimes. Come in, pretend they're buying, waste our time. Scarlett studied her for a long moment. How many times has that actually happened, Patricia? Maybe 3 times? In 5 years? 3 times in 5 years. And based on those 3 experiences, you decided this man wasn't serious. Then you called Richard instead of working with him yourself. Why? Patricia's eyes were filling with tears. I thought if he was legitimate, Richard would get the commission. And if he wasn't, Richard would handle it better than I could. So you passed him up the chain to avoid responsibility either way. I'm sorry. Patricia's voice broke. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking about I should have. Scarlett held up a hand. You're not fired, but you're suspended for 2 weeks without pay. Use that time to think about whether you actually want to be in sales, because sales is about seeing people, not judging them. Patricia nodded mutely, tears running down her face. Scarlett addressed the rest of the staff. Everyone else who ignored this customer, and you know who you are. You have 1 week to review our company values. Then you'll meet with HR to discuss whether you understand them. If we see this behavior again from anyone, termination won't be a question. It will be a guarantee. She paused, letting that sink in. This company was built on the idea that everyone deserves quality, not just people who look like they can afford it. Everyone. If you can't sell with that principle in mind, you're in the wrong profession. Her eyes swept across the group. Dismissed. The staff dispersed quickly, some heading toward offices, others to different corners of the showroom. A few looked back at Mason with expressions he couldn't quite read. Shame, maybe. Or curiosity. When they were alone as you could be in a luxury car dealership on a Saturday morning, Scarlett finally turned to Mason fully. I apologize, she said, for all of it. Mason didn't know what to do with his hands. You didn't do anything wrong. This is my company. What happens here is my responsibility. She crouched down slightly to be at eye level with Chloe. And I'm especially sorry to you. Nobody should be treated like that, and especially not while they're looking for a blueberry car. Chloe stared at her with wide eyes. How did you know about the blueberry car? I heard you talking about it in the parking lot. Are you really a superhero? Scarlett's lips twitched. No, just someone who really doesn't like bullies. My daddy isn't a bully. He's the nicest person ever. I believe you. Scarlett stood, looked at Mason. The SUV you were looking at, the Navigator. Do you still want it? Mason felt off balance. Everything was happening too fast. Maybe, but the price? $47,000, cash, if you're still interested. That's $7,000 below asking. Consider it an apology. Ma'am, Scarlett, please. Scarlett. The name felt strange in his mouth, too familiar for someone he'd just met, or met again, or whatever this was. I appreciate what you did back there, more than I can say, but I can't accept charity. Something flickered in Scarlett's expression. Surprise, maybe. It's not charity. It's a business transaction. At a $7,000 loss, a $7,000 investment in doing the right thing. Mason shook his head. I need to think about it. This whole day has been... He gestured vaguely at everything. A lot. Scarlett studied him for a moment, then nodded. That's fair. But while you're thinking, let me show you something. She led them through the showroom to a door marked Private, Staff Only, and swiped a keycard. Behind it was a hallway lined with offices, and at the end, a larger office with windows overlooking the lot. Scarlett's office, clearly. The desk was clean, the shelves organized, everything precise and controlled. There was exactly one personal item visible, a framed newspaper clipping on the wall. Mason stepped closer to read it. The headline said, Mystery Hero Saves CEO in Highway Crash. Below was a grainy photo of his pickup truck taken from a distance. The article itself was short, mostly speculation about who had pulled Scarlett Vale from the burning wreckage and disappeared before anyone could identify him. I kept every article, Scarlett said from behind him. Hired investigators, checked highway patrol records. But you'd given a fake name to the police, Mason remembered. He'd said his name was John Smith because he hadn't wanted reporters showing up at his door while Sarah was dying, hadn't wanted his 15 minutes of fame when every minute belonged to his wife. I'm sorry, he said. I wasn't trying to be mysterious. I had somewhere I needed to be. Your wife was sick. Mason turned to look at her. How did you... I didn't know then, but I had your license plate number from the police report. It took some work to trace, but I eventually found records. Sarah Reed, stage 4 cancer. She passed away 4 months after you saved me. The words sat heavy in the office. I'm sorry, Scarlett said quietly. I can't imagine. It was a long time ago. The lie came automatically. 4 years wasn't long at all. 4 years was yesterday. 4 years was still waking up some mornings and reaching across the bed before remembering. Chloe had wandered to the window and was looking out at the parking lot. I can see our truck from here, the whole thing. Scarlett moved to stand beside her. It's a good truck. Daddy loves it. He says it's been through everything with us. I believe that too. Mason watched them standing side by side, the billionaire CEO and his 6-year-old daughter, and felt something shift in his chest. Scarlett wasn't performing, wasn't doing the thing adults sometimes did where they pretended to care about kids while really just waiting for the conversation to return to grown-up topics. She was actually listening. Mr. Reed, Scarlett said, still looking out the window. Can I ask you something? Mason, please. Mason. She turned to face him. Why did you stop? That night on the highway. You had somewhere important to be. The storm was dangerous. Most people would have called 911 and kept driving. Why did you stop? Mason thought about it. I didn't really decide to. I just saw the car go over and my truck was already pulling onto the shoulder. By the time I thought about it, I was already running down the embankment. You risked your life without thinking about it. I guess. That's not normal, Mason. That's exceptional. Mason felt uncomfortable under her gaze. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. Before Mason could respond, Chloe piped up from the window. Daddy helps everybody. Last week he fixed Mrs. Chen's car for free because she didn't have money. And he always gives his lunch to the homeless man by the garage. And when I was sick last month, he stayed up all night even though he had to work in the morning. Chloe, it's true. You think I don't notice, but I do. Scarlett was smiling. You notice a lot. I'm very observant. That's what my teacher says. I can tell. Mason cleared his throat. About the SUV, could I have some time? Maybe come back Monday? Scarlett pulled a business card from her desk and wrote something on the back. My direct line? Call me when you're ready. No pressure. No time limit. And Mason? She met his eyes. The price is $47,000 whether you decide today or next year. That's not changing. Mason took the card. The front had her name and title embossed in silver. The back had a phone number written in surprisingly messy handwriting. Thank you, he said, for everything today. You didn't have to... Yes, I did. Her voice was firm. 10 years ago, you did something you didn't have to do. You saved my life. Today was the absolute least I could do in return. They walked back through the showroom together. The staff were all carefully busy, not staring, but obviously aware of every movement. Mason felt their eyes tracking him, reassessing. At the entrance, Scarlett paused. Mason, can I ask you something else? Sure. What do you do? For work, I mean. Chloe said you're a mechanic, but... She hesitated. The way you approached the SUV earlier, the questions you asked, you weren't looking at it like a customer. You were analyzing it like an engineer. Mason shifted his weight. I used to be. An engineer. Automotive design. I worked for Summit Motors for 3 years before Sarah got sick. You left to take care of her. They needed me full-time, and she needed me more. And after? After, I needed something flexible. Something where I could be there for Chloe. The garage hired me, and the owner lets me adjust my schedule when I need to. It's not glamorous, but it works. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Do you miss it? Engineering? Mason thought about the question honestly. Sometimes, I liked solving problems, figuring out how to make things better. But I like being there when Chloe gets off the school bus more. Scarlett nodded slowly like he'd confirmed something. Call me Monday. Or before, whenever you're ready. They shook hands. Her grip was firm, businesslike, and Mason led Chloe back out to the parking lot. The truck started on the second try, which was better than usual. Chloe buckled herself into the booster seat Mason had installed so carefully it might as well have been welded in place. Did we get the blueberry car? She asked as they pulled onto the street. Not today, Sweet Pea. But the superhero lady said we could. She did. But Daddy needs to think about it. What's there to think about? She made it the right price. She was nice. She liked you. Mason glanced in the rearview mirror at Chloe's reflection. You think so? I know so. She looked at you the way Mrs. Patterson looks at Mr. Patterson, like you're interesting. Mrs. Patterson is 70, and Mr. Patterson is her husband of 50 years. So, you can still be interesting to people who aren't 70. Mason laughed despite himself. Where do you learn this stuff? I observe. I told you. They drove in silence for a while. The streets were busy with Saturday shoppers, people living normal lives. Mason tried to process everything that had happened. The humiliation, the vindication, the strange intensity of Scarlet Vale looking at him like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. Daddy? Yeah, Sweet Pea? Are you going to call her? Mason didn't answer right away. His phone, a 3-year-old model with a cracked screen, sat in the cup holder. Scarlett's card was in his pocket. I don't know, he said finally. Why not? Because people like her don't really want people like us in their lives, Chloe. She was being nice, paying back a favor, but that doesn't mean... He stopped, unsure how to explain the mathematics of social class to a 6-year-old. That's dumb, Chloe announced. Excuse me? It's dumb. She looked at you like you matter, not like the mean man at the store, like you actually matter. Mason's throat tightened. You matter to me. That's what's important. I know I matter to you, but you matter to you too. You're allowed to matter to other people. 6 years old. His daughter was 6 years old and somehow understood things that Mason had spent 4 years trying not to think about. They pulled into the driveway of their apartment building, a converted house split into 4 units, theirs being the smallest and cheapest. The landlord had promised to fix the loose step for 6 months. Mason had fixed it himself last week. Inside, their apartment was exactly as they'd left it. Chloe's cereal bowl still on the table from breakfast. Mason's coffee mug in the sink. The drawing of the blueberry car on the refrigerator, held up with a magnet shaped like a sunflower that Sarah had bought at a craft fair a lifetime ago. Mason made grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch while Chloe colored at the kitchen table. The silence was comfortable, familiar. This was his life. Small, simple, safe. But Scarlett's card kept pulling his attention like a magnet. After lunch, while Chloe napped, Mason sat at the kitchen table and pulled out his phone. He'd been checking his savings account obsessively for months, watching the number creep toward his goal. Now he opened it again and stared at the balance. $47,000. 4 years of overtime. 4 years of skipping lunches. 4 years of saying no to everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. He could buy the SUV. Could give Chloe the blueberry car she'd drawn 100 times. Could finally replace the truck that barely started in winter and had no air conditioning in summer. But something held him back. It wasn't the money. He'd made peace with spending it long ago. It was something else. Something about the way Scarlett had looked at him when she'd asked about engineering. Like she saw something in him that he'd forgotten was there. His phone rang, making him jump. Unknown number. Hello? Mason Reed? The voice was female, professional. This is Jennifer Hartley from Vale Automotive Corporate. Ms. Vale asked me to follow up regarding your visit to Sterling Prestige Motors today. Mason's stomach tightened. Is there a problem? No, sir. Quite the opposite. Ms. Vale wanted to ensure you receive proper service and to confirm that the pricing discussed was documented. I have a note here that the 2026 Navigator, deep sapphire blue, is reserved under your name at $47,000, cash purchase. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. But I haven't decided... Of course. There's no pressure. The vehicle will remain reserved for you indefinitely. Whenever you're ready, simply call this number and we'll arrange everything. She paused. Ms. Vale also asked me to pass along a message. Okay. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Tell him that people who help others without expecting anything in return deserve to accept help when it's offered, and that saying no to her is getting old." Despite everything, Mason smiled. She said that? Word for word, sir. She was very insistent I relay it exactly. Tell her I appreciate it. I need some time. Of course. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you. After he hung up, Mason sat staring at his phone. Getting old, like she'd been trying to help him for 10 years and he'd been refusing the whole time. Which was sort of true. He'd left the crash scene before she could thank him, had given a fake name, had disappeared so completely that it took her a decade to find him. Why had he done that? He knew the answer, Sarah. Everything had been about Sarah, about not wasting a single minute on anything that wasn't her, about making sure every moment he had left with her counted. But Sarah was gone, and Mason had spent 4 years in a kind of holding pattern, working, raising Chloe, surviving, not really living, just going through the motions of a half-life, like he'd died along with his wife, but nobody had told his body yet. "Daddy?" He looked up to find Chloe standing in the doorway, hair messed from sleep. "Hey, sweet pea. Good nap?" "Okay, nap." She climbed into his lap, something she was getting almost too big for. "Were you thinking about the superhero lady?" "How did you know?" "You have your thinking face, the one you get when you're trying to decide something hard." Mason wrapped his arms around her. "You know what?" "What?" "You're too smart for your own good." "Teacher says that too, but she says it like it's good." "It is good." He kissed the top of her head. "You want to know what I'm thinking?" "Duh." "I'm thinking maybe we should get the blueberry car." Chloe pulled back to look at him. "Really?" "Really. You've been patient for a long time. And the car is safe, and—" He paused. "And maybe it's time to stop being scared of things working out." "Were you scared?" "A little. When good things happen, sometimes I worry they'll go away." Chloe considered this seriously. "Like Mom went away." The words hit Mason in the chest, but Chloe's tone was matter-of-fact, not sad. "Yeah," he said, "like that. But the car won't go away. Cars don't get sick." "No, they don't. And the superhero lady won't go away either. She's been looking for you for 10 whole years. That's longer than I've been alive." Mason laughed. "That's a good point. So we should get the car, and you should call her, and maybe we can have dinner that's not sandwiches sometimes." "We have dinner that's not sandwiches. Spaghetti doesn't count. That's just long sandwiches without bread." Mason tickled her until she squealed, and for a moment everything was simple again. Just a dad and his daughter in a small apartment, laughing. But when Chloe went back to coloring, Mason pulled out Scarlett's card again. The direct line. She'd given him her direct line. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed. She answered on the second ring. "This is Scarlett. It's Mason Reed." A pause. Then, "That was faster than I expected. My daughter is very persuasive. She seems like a smart kid. Too smart. She basically called me an idiot for hesitating." Scarlett laughed, and it sounded genuine. "I like her even more now." "I want to buy the car," Mason said. "The Navigator. If the offer still stands." "It stands. When do you want to pick it up?" "Is Monday too soon?" "Monday is perfect. I'll have Jennifer arrange everything. You can come by the dealership, or we can bring it to you if you prefer." "The dealership is fine." "Good." Another pause. "Mason, can I ask you something?" "You've asked me a lot of things today already." "One more. Why did you change your mind?" Mason looked at Chloe, bent over her drawing, tongue between her teeth in concentration. "My daughter told me I'm allowed to matter to other people," he said, "and I figured if she's smart enough to know that at 6, I should probably be smart enough to listen." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. "She's right. You do matter. Well, thank you for everything today. Thank you for stopping 10 years ago and for calling today. I'll see you Monday." After they hung up, Mason sat with his phone in his hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Or just the sense that maybe, after 4 years of treading water, he was finally allowed to swim toward shore. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made October worth enduring. Mason woke up at 5:30 out of habit, even though he'd arranged to take the day off from the garage. Chloe was already awake, sitting on her bed with the blueberry car drawing in her lap, whispering to it like it was a pet that needed reassurance. "You excited?" Mason asked from her doorway. She nodded so hard her whole body moved. "Do you think it'll have the movie screen?" "I think it will." "And the buttons that make the seats warm?" "Probably those too." "This is the best day of my whole life." Mason felt his chest compress. 6 years old, and the best day of her life was getting a car. Not a trip to Disneyland or a birthday party, just a safe vehicle with heated seats. He'd failed her in so many small ways. All those times she'd asked for dance classes he couldn't afford. The birthday parties she hadn't attended because the gifts would have cost too much. The school field trips he'd had to miss because he couldn't take time off work. But maybe this made up for some of it. Maybe. They got ready in a kind of excited silence. Chloe putting on her favorite dress, purple with white flowers, getting tight across the shoulders because she'd grown since Sarah bought it 2 years ago. Mason wore the same button-down from Saturday, freshly washed. His best jeans. The boots he'd polished last night until Chloe asked if he was going to a wedding. The drive to the dealership felt different than Saturday. Less dread, more anticipation. The truck rattled over familiar roads, and Mason found himself patting the dashboard absently. "You saying goodbye to the truck?" Chloe asked. "No, we're keeping it. But we'll have the blueberry car. We'll have both. The truck's been through too much to just get rid of." Chloe seemed to consider this. "Like how I still have my baby blanket, even though I'm big now?" Exactly like that. Sterling prestige. Motors looked different on a Monday morning, less crowded, more businesslike. Mason parked in the same spot as Saturday, and for a second he just sat there with his hands on the steering wheel. "Daddy, we have to go in." "I know." "So why are we sitting here?" "Just taking a minute." "Are you nervous?" Mason looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Maybe a little." "Because of the mean man?" "He's not here anymore, remember?" "Then why nervous?" "How to explain it?" That walking back into a place that had humiliated you felt like volunteering for a second round? That even though Scarlett had fixed everything, some part of him still expected to be told he didn't belong? "Sometimes when something bad happens somewhere, it's hard to go back," he said finally. "Even when you know it'll be different." Chloe unbuckled herself and climbed into the front seat, wrapping her small arms around his neck from behind. "It'll be okay, Daddy. The superhero lady promised." Mason closed his eyes, let himself take strength from a 6-year-old's certainty. "You're right. Let's go get your blueberry car." The showroom doors opened automatically, and the blast of conditioned air carried the same leather and money smell as Saturday, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The sales associate nearest the entrance, a young guy Mason didn't recognize from Saturday, looked up immediately and smiled. "Good morning. Welcome to Sterling Prestige. How can I help you folks today?" "I'm Mason Reed. I have an appointment." "Mr. Reed, yes, sir. Ms. Hartley is expecting you. If you'll follow me." They walked through the showroom, and Mason noticed people looking at them differently. Not with judgment, with something closer to curiosity. Maybe respect. A few offered small nods or smiles. Word had gotten around, apparently. Jennifer Hartley met them in a small conference room off the main floor. She was maybe 40, dark hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing glasses that made her look like she ran the world's most organized library. "Mr. Reed, wonderful to meet you in person, and you must be Chloe." Chloe shook her hand very seriously. "I'm here for the blueberry car." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "I heard. We have it ready for you. But first, there's some paperwork, and someone wanted to say hello." Before Mason could ask who, the conference room door opened and Scarlett walked in. She was dressed differently than Saturday. Still a suit, but charcoal gray instead of black. Slightly less severe. Her hair was down, which made her look younger. More approachable. Though there was still something about the way she carried herself that suggested she could buy the building they were standing in without checking her bank account. "Mason, Chloe, good morning." "Good, Titico." "Morning," Mason said, suddenly aware of every stain on his jeans, every scuff on his boots. Then he mentally kicked himself. She'd already seen him at his worst. No point pretending now. "How was the rest of your weekend?" Scarlett asked, taking a seat across from them like this was a normal social call and not a business transaction. "Quiet. Good. Chloe's been vibrating since Saturday." "I can see that." Scarlett looked at Chloe, who was indeed bouncing slightly in her chair. "You ready to see it?" "Can we see it now? Before the paperwork?" Scarlett glanced at Jennifer, who shrugged. "I don't see why not. The paperwork will be here when we get back." They walked back through the showroom to a different section, where the sapphire navigator sat under focused lighting like a museum piece. Someone had tied a large white bow to the hood. Chloe stopped walking, just stopped dead and stared. "Is that ours?" she whispered. "It is," Scarlett said. "Or it will be, once your dad signs some papers." Chloe approached the SUV like it might disappear if she moved too fast. She touched the hood gently, then the door handle, then pressed her face against the window to see inside. It's perfect, she breathed. It's exactly perfect. Mason felt something crack in his chest. When was the last time he'd given her something that made her this happy? When was the last time he'd been able to provide something instead of just barely maintaining? Want to sit inside? Scarlett asked. Chloe nodded frantically. Scarlett opened the door and Chloe climbed into the back seat like she was entering sacred space. She touched everything carefully. The leather, the armrests, the controls for the entertainment system. There's the movie screen, she said, pointing. And cup holders and, Daddy, look, there's a place to plug in my tablet. Mason leaned in and the smell of new car hit him. That specific combination of leather and plastic and possibility. He'd forgotten what that smelled like. You like it? He asked unnecessarily. I love it. I love it so much. Can we take it home right now? Soon as we finish the paperwork. Scarlett was standing a few feet back, watching them with an expression Mason couldn't quite read. Not smug, not even particularly satisfied. Something softer. Thank you, he said to her, for making this happen. You made it happen. You're the one who saved for 4 years. You know what I mean. I do, and you're welcome. She paused. Mason, can I steal you for a minute while Chloe explores? Jennifer can stay with her. Mason looked at Chloe, who was now investigating the third row of seats like an archaeologist discovering a tomb. You good here, sweet pea? Uh-huh. I'm counting all the cup holders. There's so many. Jennifer smiled. We'll be fine. Take your time. Scarlett led Mason back through the showroom to her office. The newspaper clipping was still on the wall, the desk still precise and uncluttered. She gestured to one of the chairs facing the desk, then sat in the other instead of behind the desk, making it less formal, maybe. I have a proposition, she said without preamble. Mason's stomach tightened. Okay. I've been thinking about our conversation Saturday, about you being an engineer. I was an engineer, past tense. Skills don't expire, Mason. You left to take care of your wife. That's not the same as failing. I didn't say I failed. But you think it. She leaned forward slightly. I looked into your background. I hope that's not creepy, but I run a major corporation and you saved my life, so I figured you'd understand due diligence. Mason didn't know whether to be flattered or concerned. What did you find? That you graduated top of your class from state. That Summit Motors hired you straight out of college. That in 3 years there, you filed 6 patents for safety improvements. That your supervisor wrote in your exit interview that losing you was like losing his best mechanic and his conscience in one shot. Mason blinked. He said that? Apparently you kept pushing for features that would cost more but save lives. Made you annoying but valuable. She smiled slightly. Then you left and you've spent 4 years fixing transmissions and rotating tires, which is honest work, but it's not what you were meant to do. What I was meant to do doesn't pay enough for flexible hours. It does if you work for the right company. Mason saw where this was going. Scarlett, hear me out. Vale Automotive has a research and development division focused on safety innovation. We're working on next-generation collision avoidance, pedestrian protection, rollover prevention. All the things that keep people alive when everything goes wrong. She met his eyes. I need people who understand that cars aren't just products, they're responsibilities. And from what I've read, you understand that better than most. You want to hire me. I want to offer you a position, yes. Senior engineer in the safety division. Full benefits, salary that would let you work normal hours, flexible schedule for Chloe. You'd be doing actual engineering again instead of oil changes. It was too much. The car, now this. Like the universe was trying to make up for 4 years of difficulty all in one weekend. I can't, Mason said automatically. Why not? Because, he gestured vaguely, because I fix cars in a garage. I haven't done real engineering in 4 years. I'd be useless. You rebuilt a 1997 Dodge transmission from memory last week. Your boss told me you can diagnose problems other mechanics can't figure out. You're not useless, Mason. You're rusty. There's a difference. You talked to my boss? I told you, due diligence. He had glowing things to say. Also said if I hired you away, he'd understand, but he'd be devastated. Mason rubbed his face. This is insane. Why? Because good things aren't supposed to happen to people like you? The words hit harder than they should have. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I recognize that look, Mason. I spent years thinking the same thing, that success was for other people, that I had to fight for every scrap. Then I realized the fight was making me miserable, and maybe I was allowed to just accept help sometimes. This isn't help. I don't even know what this is. It's a job offer from someone who thinks you'd be good at it. That's all. She stood, walked to her desk, pulled out a folder. Here, job description, salary range, benefits package. Take it home. Think about it. No pressure, no deadline. But Mason? She handed him the folder. You saved my life. The least you can do is consider letting me improve yours. Mason took the folder because refusing would have been rude. It was heavier than expected, professional, real. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I ask. They walked back to find Chloe sitting in the driver's seat of the Navigator, hands on the wheel making quiet vroom sounds. Did you count all the cup holders? Scarlett asked. 12. There's 12 whole cup holders. That's more cup holders than we have cups. You can never have too many cup holders. That's what I said. The paperwork took 20 minutes. Mason signed forms, provided his ID and proof of insurance, counted out $47,000 in hundreds that he'd withdrawn from the bank that morning. The cash made a substantial pile on Jennifer's desk, and Mason saw her eyebrows rise slightly before she caught herself. All set, Jennifer said finally, handing Mason a key fob and a folder of documents. The Navigator is officially yours. Congratulations. Chloe squealed and hugged Mason's arm. They walked out to the parking lot together. Mason, Chloe, Scarlett, and Jennifer. The morning sun made the Navigator's blue paint look even deeper, almost purple in certain lights. It really is blueberry-colored, Scarlett observed. Told you, Chloe said smugly. Mason stood between his old truck and his new SUV, feeling the weight of the transition. 4 years in the truck. 4 years of memories. Sarah's last ride home from the hospital, Chloe's first day of kindergarten, 1,000 trips to the grocery store, the doctor, the garage. You okay? Scarlett asked quietly. Yeah, just saying goodbye, I guess. You're keeping it though, right? Definitely. Just feels strange. End of an era. Beginning of a new one. Mason looked at her. You always this optimistic? No. Usually I'm a complete pessimist. You're a bad influence. Despite everything, Mason laughed. Chloe was already in the Navigator, buckled into her booster seat, touching every surface within reach. Daddy, come on, we have to drive it. Where do you want to go? Mason asked. Everywhere. Everywhere might take a while. Then let's start with home so I can show Mrs. Chen. Mason turned to Scarlett and Jennifer. Thank you, both of you, for everything. Jennifer nodded. Our pleasure, Mr. Reed. Enjoy the vehicle. Scarlett extended her hand and Mason shook it. Her grip was firm, professional, but her eyes were warm. Think about the job, she said. I will. And Mason, drive safe. That SUV is designed to protect what matters, but it works better if you don't test it. Yes, ma'am. He started to walk to the Navigator, then paused, turned back. Scarlett? Yeah? Why are you doing all this? And don't say it's because I pulled you out of a car. People don't offer jobs to everyone who helps them. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. You want the honest answer? Please.
But she told me.
Because when I asked why you stopped that night, you said you didn't decide to. You just did. Most people spend their whole lives calculating, weighing risks and benefits, wondering what's in it for them. You just acted, and that's rare. That's worth something. She paused. Also, your daughter told me you matter, and I believed her. Mason felt his throat tighten. She's pretty persuasive. She gets it from you. I don't think so. I'm not persuasive at all. You convinced me you were worth finding. Took 10 years, but here we are. Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and got in the Navigator. The interior smelled like leather and newness. Every surface was perfect, unmarked. The dashboard lit up when he pressed the start button, displaying more information than he knew what to do with. This is so cool, Chloe breathed from the back seat. It's like a spaceship. A very safe spaceship. The best spaceship. Mason adjusted the mirrors, the seat, familiarizing himself with the controls. Everything responded smoothly, precisely. No grinding sounds, no hesitation, just pure mechanical reliability. He pulled out of the parking lot carefully, hyper-aware of the vehicle's size and value. The truck had been small, maneuverable. This was substantial, protected. "How does it feel?" Chloe asked. "Different, good different. Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" "It's 10 in the morning." "Ice cream doesn't have a time, Daddy. That's what Mom always said." The mention of Sarah should have hurt, but somehow it didn't. Not today. Today it felt like she was there, approving, telling him it was okay to move forward, to accept good things. "Ice cream it is," Mason said. They drove through familiar streets that looked different from behind a new windshield. Past the garage where Mason worked, where his boss stood outside and gave him a huge thumbs up. Past Chloe's school, where she pointed excitedly at the parking lot like they'd be showing up differently tomorrow. Past the apartment building that had been home for 4 years. Mrs. Chen was in her usual spot on the front porch, reading a magazine and drinking tea. She looked up when they pulled in, and her eyes went wide. Chloe was out of the car before Mason had fully parked. "Mrs. Chen, look, it's the blueberry car." Mrs. Chen stood, walked down the steps carefully. Her hip had been bothering her lately, and examined the navigator with appropriate reverence. "Very nice," she said in her accented English. "Very fancy car. You win lottery?" "No, ma'am. Just saved for a long time." 4 years, Chloe supplied. And also a superhero lady helped. Mrs. Chen looked at Mason with raised eyebrows. "Superhero lady? Long story. I'll tell you later." "I want to hear this story. Sounds better than my magazines." She patted the navigator's hood. "You deserve nice things, Mason. You good man. Work hard. Love your daughter. About time something good happens." The simple validation made Mason's eyes sting. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You take me to store later? My car's still broken." "Of course. Anytime." Inside their apartment, Chloe immediately started drawing a new picture. This one of the navigator with all 12 cup holders labeled. Mason made lunch mechanically, his mind elsewhere. The folder from Scarlett sat on the kitchen table where he'd set it down. Professional, substantial, unopened. He stared at it while grilling cheese sandwiches. Opening it felt like admitting something, like acknowledging that maybe his life could be different, better, that he didn't have to stay in survival mode forever. But survival mode was safe. Survival mode was predictable. You knew where you stood in survival mode. "Daddy, you're burning the sandwich." Mason flipped it quickly. Burned on one side, perfect on the other. Story of his life. After lunch, while Chloe watched a movie, Mason finally opened the folder. The job description was detailed. Senior Safety Engineer, Research and Development Division, Vail Automotive. Responsibilities included analyzing collision data, developing new safety protocols, collaborating with design teams, overseeing crash test programs. The salary range made him blink, twice what he made at the garage. 3 times if he included the benefits. The benefits themselves were listed on a separate page. Health insurance, actual good insurance, not the bare minimum he currently had. Dental, vision. 4 weeks paid vacation. Flexible scheduling with core hours of 9 to 3, allowing him to drop Chloe off and pick her up from school. It was everything he needed, everything he'd stopped letting himself want. There was a handwritten note paperclipped to the front page. Scarlett's messy handwriting. "Mason, this isn't charity. We need good people. You're good people. And if you say no because you think you don't deserve it, I'm going to tell Chloe you're being dumb again. S." Mason read it 3 times. His phone rang. Unknown number, but he was starting to recognize the pattern. "Mr. Reed, this is David Park from Vail Automotive HR. Ms. Vail mentioned she'd discussed a potential position with you." "She did, yes. Wonderful. I wanted to reach out personally to let you know we'd be thrilled to have you join the team. I've reviewed your background, and frankly, you're exactly the kind of engineer we're looking for. Someone who understands that safety isn't just a feature set, it's a philosophy." Mason sat down heavily. "I appreciate that, but I haven't decided." Of course. No pressure. "I just wanted you to know that if you're interested, we can move quickly. You could start as soon as next week if you wanted, or take time to transition from your current position. We're flexible." "Next week? Too fast?" "No, just..." Mason rubbed his face. "I need to think about it." "Absolutely. Take all the time you need. My direct number is on the paperwork. Call whenever you're ready. Or if you're not ready, that's fine too, though I'll be disappointed." David paused. My daughter is about your daughter's age. 6, right? Yeah, 6. Good age, hard age. They need you around. This position would let you be around. That's worth considering. After they hung up, Mason sat staring at his phone. Everyone was pushing. Gently, kindly, but pushing. Scarlett, David, even Mrs. Chen in her own way. All telling him the same thing. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to accept it. But wanting more had consequences. Taking the job meant leaving the garage, leaving the flexibility he'd fought for, trusting that this new thing would work. It meant risking the stability he'd built on believing that someone like Scarlett Vale actually saw potential in someone like him. Daddy? Chloe was standing in the doorway, holding her tablet. Yeah, Sweet Pea? I looked up Vale Automotive. They make really safe cars, like the safest, and they have a program where they teach kids about car safety in schools. That's cool. It is cool. And their office has a cafeteria, with different foods every day, not just sandwiches. Mason smiled despite himself. You researching my potential job? I'm being observant. We talked about this. She climbed into his lap, getting too big for it, but fitting anyway. Do you want the job? I don't know. That's okay. Not knowing is okay. She paused. But Daddy? Yeah? You always tell me I can do hard things, that being scared doesn't mean I can't try. I do say that. So maybe you should listen to you. Mason wrapped his arms around her, buried his face in her hair. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo they bought in bulk, and something indefinably Chloe. When did you get so smart? He murmured. I was born smart. You just keep forgetting. That night, after Chloe was asleep, Mason stood in the parking lot looking at the navigator. The streetlight made the blue paint look black, mysterious. Inside, he could see the booster seat they'd transferred from the truck, the small stuffed bear Chloe refused to leave behind, the normalcy of their life imported into this new thing. His phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number, but he knew who it was before opening it. No pressure. But my offer stands as long as you need. You saved my life. Least I can do is offer you a chance, to improve yours. Scarlett. Mason typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Thank you. Still thinking, but thank you. The reply came immediately. Take your time. The job isn't going anywhere. Neither am I. Mason pocketed his phone and walked back upstairs. The apartment was quiet, familiar, safe. But safety, he was starting to realize, wasn't the same as living. And maybe it was time to try living again. Mason spent the next 3 days in a kind of limbo, going through the motions at the garage while his mind wandered elsewhere. Wednesday afternoon, he was under a Honda Civic changing the oil when his boss Marcus walked over and kicked his boot gently. You planning to tell me what's going on, or am I supposed to guess? Mason rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag that was beyond dirty. What do you mean? I mean you've been distracted all week. Yesterday you put the wrong oil filter on the Mazda. You never make mistakes like that. Mason sat up, leaning against the Honda's tire. The garage smelled like it always did. Motor oil, metal, the coffee Marcus brewed too strong every morning. Familiar. Comfortable. I got a job offer, he said finally. Marcus nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting it. Vale Automotive called me last week. Asked about you. I figured something was coming. You didn't tell me. Wasn't my news to tell. Besides, I knew you'd overthink it. Marcus pulled over a rolling stool and sat down with a grunt. His knees had been bothering him lately, though he refused to admit it. Engineering job? Yeah, safety division, good pay, benefits, flexible hours. Sounds terrible. You should definitely turn it down. Mason looked at him sharply, but Marcus was smiling. I'm kidding, Reed. It sounds perfect. So why are you still here? Because... Mason gestured around the garage. Because you've been good to me. Because this place let me have the schedule I needed when I needed it. Walking away feels like moving on with your life? Like abandoning something. Marcus shook his head. You're not abandoning anything. You're a good mechanic, Mason, but you're not meant to be here forever. I always knew that. Hell, first day you showed up, I could tell you were overqualified, but you needed work and I needed help, so it worked. It's worked for 4 years. And now it's time for something else. That's not betrayal, that's just life. Marcus stood up with another grunt. Take the job. Come back and visit sometimes. Maybe fix my truck for free since you'll be making the big bucks. Mason laughed despite himself. Your truck's beyond fixing. See? I need you to go make safer vehicles so mine doesn't fall apart. The conversation should have made the decision easier, but somehow it didn't. Mason drove home that evening in the Navigator, still getting used to how smoothly it handled, how quiet the engine was, and found Chloe waiting on the porch steps with Mrs. Chen. Daddy, Mrs. Chen made dumplings and she says we have to eat them while they're hot. She's very insistent, Mrs. Chen added, like small bossy person. I'm not bossy, I'm efficient, and they ate dinner in Mrs. Chen's apartment, which was identical to Mason's but somehow felt completely different. Where Mason's place was sparse and functional, Mrs. Chen had filled every surface with photos, plants, small decorative items collected over decades. It felt lived in, permanent. So, Mrs. Chen said after Chloe had been excused to watch TV in the living room, you taking the job or not? Mason nearly choked on his dumpling. Does everyone know about this? Small building. Mrs. Patterson heard you on phone. She told Mr. Richardson. He told me. We all talk. She refilled his tea. Also, you have job offer face. Very obvious. I don't have a job offer face. Yes, you do. Same face you had when Sarah was sick and doctors gave you options. Scared but hopeful. Guilty for hoping. The observation hit too close. Mason set down his chopsticks. I don't know if I can do it, he admitted. The engineering. It's been 4 years. What if I forgot everything? What if I'm not good enough anymore? Mrs. Chen made a dismissive sound. You fixed my car 2 months ago. Fine problem 3 other mechanics missed. You still good at figuring things out. That's different. That's mechanical work. This is design, innovation, working with teams. Still figuring things out, just fancier things. She leaned forward. Mason, you good man, good father, but you've been in pause mode since Sarah died. Working just enough, living just enough. Chloe needs you, yes, but she also needs to see you living, not just surviving. I am living. You going through motions, big difference. Mason looked toward the living room where Chloe was sprawled on the floor, completely absorbed in her show. What if I take the job and I'm terrible at it? What if they figure out they made a mistake hiring me? Then you learn. You try. You fail, maybe. But trying and failing, better than never trying. Mrs. Chen patted his hand. Worst thing already happened to you, Mason. You lost Sarah. Nothing scarier than that. So why still so scared? The question sat heavy between them. Because, Mason said quietly, if I try and fail, I prove right everyone who looked at me in that dealership and saw someone who didn't belong. If I just stay at the garage, I never have to find out if they were right. Ah, Mrs. Chen nodded. So you protecting yourself from maybe being proved wrong by definitely being small. Very smart plan. You don't have to be sarcastic. I'm old. I earned sarcasm. She stood, started clearing dishes. You want my real advice? Do I have a choice? No. Here's advice. Ask Chloe. 6-year-old children very honest. They tell truth even when truth is hard. You ask her what she thinks, she tell you. That night, after they'd walked back to their apartment and Chloe had brushed her teeth and put on pajamas, Mason sat on the edge of her bed. Can I ask you something important? Chloe sat up straighter, sensing seriousness. Okay. The job that Ms. Vale offered me at her company, what do you think I should do? Chloe was quiet for a long moment, her face scrunched in concentration. Will you be happy there? I don't know, maybe? Will we still live here? Yes, same apartment, same school for you, same everything, just different job for me. Will you have to work at night like you do sometimes now? No, I'd be home by dinner every day. Chloe's eyes widened. Every day? Every day. And you could help with homework? I could. And we could eat real dinners? Not just sandwiches and spaghetti? Mason felt his throat tighten. Yes, Sweet Pea, real dinners. Chloe threw her arms around his neck. Then you should take it, because I miss you when you work late, and because the superhero lady is nice and she wouldn't offer you a job if she didn't think you'd be good at it. You're pretty sure about that? I'm sure about everything. That's my job. Mason held her tight, breathing in strawberry shampoo and little kid warmth. When did you get so smart? You keep asking that. The answer's still the same. I was born this way. After Chloe fell asleep, Mason sat at the kitchen table with his phone, Scarlett's business card, and a cup of coffee going cold. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic sounds. He picked up the phone 3 times and set it down 3 times. On the 4th try, he dialed. Scarlett answered on the first ring. Mason. Is this a bad time? No, I'm just finishing some emails. What's up? Mason took a breath. I want to take the job. Silence on the other end. Then, yeah? Yeah. If the offer still stands. It stands. It'll stand until you say yes or no, and you just said yes, so yeah. Yes, this is... She laughed, and it sounded relieved. This is great. When can you start? I need to give Marcus 2 weeks' notice. Is that okay? Of course. Take whatever time you need. We're not going anywhere. A pause. Can I ask what changed your mind? My daughter told me I should take it because you wouldn't offer if you didn't think I'd be good at it. Apparently she's sure about everything. Scarlett laughed again. Smart kid. She's absolutely right, by the way. About both things. I'm still worried I'll be terrible at this. You will be. For like the first week. Everyone is terrible at new jobs for the first week. Then you figure it out. That's supposed to be reassuring? I'm not good at reassuring. I'm good at telling the truth. The truth is you're going to doubt yourself, probably screw something up, definitely feel overwhelmed, and then you're going to remember you're smart and capable, and you survived things that would break most people, and you'll be fine. Mason felt something loosen in his chest. Okay. Okay? Okay. I'll call David tomorrow. Make it official. Good. And Mason? Her voice softened. Thank you for saying yes. I know it wasn't easy. Thank you for asking, for seeing something in me I wasn't sure was still there. After they hung up, Mason sat for a long time in the quiet kitchen. The apartment looked the same as always. Small, worn, familiar. But something had shifted, like a door had opened that he hadn't even realized was locked. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Mason worked his final shifts at the garage, training the new guy Marcus hired to replace him. Said goodbye to regular customers who'd been coming to him for years. Mrs. Patterson hugged him and cried. Mr. Richardson shook his hand seriously and told him to remember the little people when he was running the company. On his last day, Marcus gave him a toolbox, an expensive one, professional grade, with Mason's name engraved on a small plaque. You'll need good tools, Marcus said gruffly. Can't engineer safety without them. I don't think I'll be using wrenches much. Tools aren't just for fixing things. They're for remembering where you came from. Mason's first day at Vail Automotive started with him getting lost trying to find parking. The corporate campus was massive. 3 buildings, perfectly landscaped grounds, a parking lot that seemed to stretch for miles. He finally found a spot in Section D and walked 10 minutes to the main entrance, already sweating despite the cool November morning. The lobby was all glass and steel and modern art he didn't understand. The security desk looked like it belonged in a museum. Mason approached with his new employee badge. They'd mailed it to him with instructions on where to go, and tried to look like he belonged. Mason Reed, he told the security guard. It's my first day. Welcome aboard. You'll want the elevator bank on the right, 3rd floor. Check in with Margot at the reception desk. The elevator was glass-walled, offering views of the lobby as it rose. Mason watched people moving below, all dressed professionally, all looking purposeful and confident. He was wearing the same button-down shirt from the dealership, newly washed, his best jeans, the boots Marcus had made him promise not to throw away. He stood out. Again. The 3rd floor was quieter than the lobby, carpeted hallways lined with frosted glass offices. Margot turned out to be a woman in her 60s with bright red glasses and a smile that looked genuine. Mason Reed, we've been expecting you. David's in a meeting, but he left instructions for your orientation. She handed him a folder. Everyone here loved folders, and a tablet. Conference room B is yours for the morning. Training videos, documentation, the usual first day stuff, lunches at noon, and your team wants to meet you at 1. Sound good? Sounds good? Nervous? Is it that obvious? Honey, everyone's nervous their first day. Even the CEO was nervous her first day, and she owned the company by then. Mason spent the morning watching videos about workplace safety, harassment policies, emergency procedures. Standard corporate stuff. professionally produced. At noon, he ventured to the cafeteria Chloe had been so excited about. It was enormous. Different stations offering different cuisines, Asian, Italian, American, a salad bar, a grill. The smell alone was overwhelming after 4 years of packed sandwiches. He got pasta because it seemed safe and found a table in the corner. Ate alone, watching groups of employees talking and laughing, clearly comfortable with each other. 4 years at the garage had been solitary work. This was going to take adjustment. "You're the new safety guy, right?" Mason looked up to find a woman, maybe 35, short dark hair, wearing a Vail Automotive polo shirt and carrying a tray loaded with what looked like 3 different meals. Mason Reed, yeah. "Keisha Harris, testing division. I run the crash test program." She sat down without asking. "Mind if I join? First days suck and eating alone is depressing." "Please," Keisha started eating like someone who'd forgotten breakfast. Between bites, she talked. "So you're the guy who saved Scarlett's life 10 years ago. That's pretty much all anyone's talking about." Mason nearly choked on his pasta. "People know about that?" "Of course they know. Scarlett doesn't personally recruit people. Like, ever. When word got out she'd hired the mystery hero from the highway crash, it became a thing." Keisha grinned. "Also, some people are saying you turned down her first offer and made her convince you. That's legendary. Nobody tells Scarlett Vail no." "I didn't. It wasn't like that." "Doesn't matter. The story's better my way." She pointed at him with her fork. "Fair warning, you're going to get asked about it. A lot. The crash, the rescue, all of it. People are curious." "Great. You could always make up increasingly ridiculous versions. By next month, you could be saying you wrestled a bear first." Despite his nerves, Mason smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." "Good. Now real talk. You ready for this job?" "Honestly, no idea." "Perfect answer. Anyone who says they're ready is lying or delusional." Keisha finished her first plate and started on the second. "The safety division is good people. Smart, dedicated, actually care about the work. You'll fit in fine." "How do you know?" "Because Scarlett hired you, and whatever else people say about her, that she's demanding, intense, kind of scary, they can't say she makes bad calls about people." At 1 o'clock, Mason met his team in a conference room with windows overlooking the parking lot. 7 people total, ranging from mid-20s to late 50s. The team lead was a man named Thomas Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, he clarified immediately, who had salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested he'd seen everything. "Welcome to safety engineering," Thomas said after introductions. "We're small, but we punch above our weight. Current projects include next-gen airbag systems, pedestrian collision avoidance, and rollover prevention. Mason, we're putting you on the pedestrian project to start. You'll work with Rachel and Miguel." Rachel was maybe 28, wearing thick-framed glasses and a Star Wars t-shirt under her blazer. Miguel looked fresh out of college, enthusiastic in a way that suggested he hadn't been beaten down by corporate life yet. "We're working on sensor systems," Rachel explained, pulling up diagrams on the conference room screen. "The goal is to detect pedestrians in low-visibility conditions and automatically brake or alert the driver. Current systems work okay in perfect conditions. We need them to work in rain, fog, darkness, with pedestrians wearing dark clothing." "So basically all the real-world conditions," Mason said. "Exactly. Most companies optimize for ideal scenarios. We're trying to optimize for when everything goes wrong." Miguel leaned forward excitedly. "Your background is perfect for this. You worked on collision systems at Summit, right?" 5 years ago, yeah. "The patents you filed there, we've been studying them. The proximity detection algorithm? Still industry leading." Mason blinked. "You've been studying my old work?" "Of course. Why do you think you're here?" The afternoon disappeared into technical discussions. Mason felt rusty at first, struggling to remember terminology and specific formulas. But slowly, like a language he'd stopped speaking, it started coming back. The logic of engineering, the process of identifying problems and systematically solving them. By 4 o'clock, his head was spinning, but in a good way. The kind of mental exhaustion that came from actually using his brain instead of just going through motions. "You good?" Thomas asked as the meeting wrapped up. "I think so. It's a lot." "It always is. But you'll get there. Go home, rest, come back tomorrow, ready to actually start working instead of just listening to us talk." Mason gathered his things and headed for the elevator. The building was still busy, people working late, meetings running over. He'd be able to leave at 5 every day. Be home for dinner, Help with homework. The thought felt surreal. He was almost to his car when his phone rang. Scarlett. How was day one? She asked without preamble. Overwhelming. Good. Scary. All of the above. Sounds about right. Thomas said you jumped into the technical discussion without hesitation. That's good. I felt like I was faking it. Everyone feels like that. It's called imposter syndrome. Ignore it. Mason unlocked the navigator, slid into the driver's seat. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really hire me? And don't say it's because I'm qualified. Lots of people are qualified. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. You remember what you said when I asked why you stopped that night? That you didn't decide, you just did? Yeah, that's why. Because I've spent 10 years building a company full of people who think before they act, who calculate risk and optimize outcomes. And that's important. But sometimes you need people who just do the right thing without running the numbers first. People who see a problem and fix it. People who care more about the outcome than the credit. She paused. That's you, Mason. That's what I need. Mason didn't know what to say. Also, Scarlett added, her tone lightening, Chloe would have been disappointed in me if I didn't hire you. And she's terrifying when she's disappointed. Mason laughed. She's 6. Exactly. Imagine when she's 16. They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, about Chloe's excitement that he'd be home for dinner, about nothing particularly important. When they hung up, Mason sat in the parking lot for a minute, watching employees stream out of the building toward their cars. He was one of them now, part of something bigger than just surviving day to day. The drive home felt different, not just because of the new car or the new job, something deeper, like he'd been holding his breath for 4 years and had finally remembered how to exhale. Chloe was waiting on the porch when he pulled up. She ran to the car before he'd fully parked, yanking open his door. How was it? Was it good? Did you like it? Did anyone ask about the superhero lady? Mason climbed out, scooped her up even though she was getting too big for it. It was good. I liked it. Yes, someone asked about Scarlett. Did you tell them about the 12 cup holders? That didn't come up. It should have. Cup holders are important. They walked inside together, Chloe chattering about her day at school, about how Mrs. Chen had promised to teach her to make dumplings this weekend, about 100 small things that made up her life. Mason listened to all of it. Actually listened, not distracted by worrying about money or overtime or whether the truck would start in the morning. For the first time in 4 years, he was present. That night, after Chloe was asleep, Mason stood in the parking lot looking at both vehicles. The Navigator, sleek and new and full of possibility. The truck, battered and familiar and full of memories. His phone buzzed. Text from Scarlett. Forgot to mention, someone's coming by your place Saturday morning. Early. Don't make plans. Mason frowned, typed back. Why? You'll see. Trust me. That's not ominous at all. Good. See you Monday. Mason pocketed his phone, shaking his head. Whatever Scarlett was planning, it was probably going to be either amazing or terrifying. With her, it was hard to tell which. Saturday morning arrived with frost on the windows and Chloe shaking Mason awake at 6:30. Daddy, there's a truck outside, a big fancy truck with a trailer. Mason groaned, pulled the pillow over his head. What time is it? Early. But you said someone was coming, remember? The superhero lady's surprise. Right. Scarlett's cryptic text. Mason had almost forgotten. He dragged himself out of bed, pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie, and followed Chloe to the window. Sure enough, a flatbed tow truck sat in the parking lot, and 2 men in Vail automotive uniforms were standing beside it, checking paperwork. What are they doing? Chloe asked. I have no idea. They went downstairs together, Chloe still in her pajamas, Mason looking like he'd been pulled through a hedge. One of the men, older, maybe 50, with a gray beard, smiled when he saw them. Mason Reed? That's me. We're here to pick up the Dodge. Ms. Vail said you'd be expecting us. Mason's stomach dropped. Pick up? Wait, what? Why? The man consulted his clipboard. Says here complete restoration, frame repair, new paint, engine overhaul, interior refurbishment, estimated timeline 4 to 6 weeks. I didn't authorize. Ms. Vail did, paid in full. We just need you to sign the release. Mason stood there in his sweatpants, brain refusing to process. Scarlett was taking his truck. for restoration, without asking. Can I call her first? Sure, but we're on a schedule, other pickups today. Mason pulled out his phone, dialed. Scarlett answered immediately, sounding far too awake for 6:45 on a Saturday. Morning. Did they arrive? What are you doing? Restoring your truck. Weren't you listening when I texted? You said someone was coming. You didn't say you were kidnapping my vehicle. It's not kidnapping if I'm bringing it back better. That's renovation. Mason rubbed his face, trying to wake up enough for this conversation. Scarlett, I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept. Here we go again, Mason. That truck saved my life, literally. It carried you through a snowstorm to pull me out of a burning car. The least I can do is make sure it's not held together by rust and prayer. It runs fine. It starts on the second try and sounds like a dying lawnmower. That's not fine. Chloe tugged on Mason's hoodie. Are they taking old grandpa? Apparently. For how long? 4 to 6 weeks, the bearded man supplied helpfully. That's okay, Chloe told Mason seriously. Old grandpa deserves a vacation. He worked very hard. Mason looked at his daughter, at the truck that had been through everything with them, at the men waiting patiently for him to make a decision. Fine, he said into the phone, but I'm paying you back. No, you're not. Scarlett, Mason, I'm a billionaire. This restoration costs less than I spend on coffee in a month. Let me do this, please. There was something in her voice, not quite begging, but close, like this mattered to her in a way he didn't fully understand. Okay, he said quietly. Thank you. You're welcome. Now sign the papers and let the nice men do their job. I'll keep you updated on the progress. After the truck was loaded, Chloe insisted on saying a formal goodbye. Patting the hood and whispering something Mason couldn't hear, they went back inside. Mrs. Chen was on her porch with morning tea, watching the whole thing with undisguised interest. Rich people problems now? She called over. Something like that? Good problems to have. The apartment felt strange without the truck in the parking lot. Mason kept looking out the window at the empty space, feeling its absence like a missing tooth. You miss it already, Chloe observed over breakfast. A little. It's coming back, though. Better than before. I know. So why sad face? Mason considered how to explain it. Sometimes when you've had something for a long time, even when it's broken or difficult, you get used to it. And when someone tries to fix it, it feels like they're taking away something familiar. Chloe chewed her cereal thoughtfully. But familiar isn't always good. Sometimes familiar is just what you're used to. 6 years old. His daughter was 6 years old and kept saying things that hit like philosophy. You're right, Mason said. As usual. I know. It's exhausting being right all the time. Mason's phone buzzed. Text from Scarlett with a photo attached. The truck on the flatbed being driven away. The caption read, Don't worry, we'll take good care of your grandfather. Mason smiled despite himself and typed back. His name is Old Grandpa. Get it right. Noted. Old Grandpa is in good hands. The first week at Vail Automotive had been orientation and meetings. The second week, Mason actually started working. Real engineering, real problems, the kind of mental challenge he'd forgotten he missed. The pedestrian detection project was harder than expected. The sensors worked perfectly in controlled conditions. Well-lit test tracks, pedestrians in bright clothing, clear weather. But introduce rain, fog, or low light, and the system started making mistakes. False positives that would break for shadows. False negatives that would miss actual people. We need better algorithmic filtering, Rachel said during their third team meeting. The sensor data is fine, we're just not interpreting it correctly. What if we're asking the wrong question, Mason said, staring at the test results spread across the conference table. Everyone looked at him. We're trying to identify pedestrians specifically, right? Looking for human shapes, movement patterns, heat signatures. But what if instead we just identify anything that might be a pedestrian and default to caution? Miguel frowned. That would give us way more false positives. In the short term, yeah, but we could train the system to learn. Every time it breaks for a shadow, it learns that particular shadow pattern isn't a threat. Over time, it gets smarter. Rachel was nodding slowly. Machine learning approach. Let the system evolve instead of trying to program perfect recognition from the start. Exactly. Thomas, who'd been listening quietly, leaned back in his chair. That's going to require cooperation with the AI division. They're protective of their territory. So we convinced them it's their idea, Rachel said with a grin. I like how you think. They spent the next week building a proposal, running simulations, gathering data. Mason worked late a few nights, but not like the garage. Here, late meant 6 instead of 5. Still home for dinner, still there to help Chloe with homework. On Friday of his second week, Scarlett stopped by the safety division. She did this occasionally, Thomas explained, just checking in on projects. But Mason suspected this visit was specifically about him. How's he doing? She asked Thomas, right in front of Mason like he wasn't there. Surprisingly good for someone who's been out of engineering for 4 years. He's already pushing the pedestrian project in new directions. Good directions? Very good directions. Scarlett looked at Mason. Told you you'd be fine. You said I'd be terrible for a week and then fine. Same thing. She joined them for lunch in the cafeteria, causing a small stir. Apparently the CEO eating with regular employees was unusual. Mason was learning that everything about Scarlett was unusual. How's Chloe adjusting? She asked as they found a quiet table. She loves that I'm home for dinner, already has opinions about what I should cook. Does she know you can't cook? She's optimistic about my potential. Scarlett smiled and Mason noticed she looked less tired than she had in the dealership. Less guarded, maybe. I got photos of the truck restoration. Want to see? She pulled out her phone, showed him pictures of his Dodge completely disassembled in what looked like a professional restoration shop. The frame was bare metal, every component removed and cataloged. They're replacing everything that's worn, Scarlett explained. New engine seals, transmission work, suspension overhaul. The body's being stripped to metal and repainted, same red, but actually red instead of faded pink. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of truck. The guys doing the restoration said it's one of the toughest Dodges they've seen. Most would have given up years ago. It had good motivation to keep running. Scarlett looked at him over her phone. So did you. The moment stretched between them, something unspoken shifting in the air. Then Rachel appeared with her tray, breaking the spell. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. You're not, Mason said quickly. We were just talking about truck restoration. Riveting, Rachel deadpanned, sitting down anyway. So, boss, you ready to hear about our machine learning proposal? Scarlett's expression shifted to business mode. Hit me. They spent lunch discussing the pedestrian project, Scarlett asking sharp questions that showed she actually understood the technical details, not just CEO-level overview. Real engineering knowledge. I like it, she said finally. Run it past the AI division. If they resist, let me know and I'll make it happen. Thank you, Rachel said. Don't thank me. It's a good idea. Mason's good idea, from what I hear. Mason felt his face heat. It was team collaboration. Sure it was, Scarlett stood, gathering her tray. Keep me posted on the progress. And Mason, good work. After she left, Rachel looked at Mason with raised eyebrows. So, you and the CEO. There's no me and the CEO. She came to lunch specifically to see you. She came to check on the project. She could have done that in email. She came to see you. Rachel grinned. I'm not judging. I'm just observing. And what I'm observing is interesting. There's nothing to observe, if you say so. But for the rest of the day, Mason couldn't stop thinking about it. The way Scarlett had looked at him when she'd said, "So did you," the way she kept finding reasons to check in, to stay involved. Maybe there was something to observe after all. 3 weeks into the job, Mason was finally starting to feel competent. The initial terror had faded into normal workplace anxiety. He knew where the bathrooms were, which coffee machine worked best, who to ask when he needed specific information. The pedestrian project was progressing. The AI division had agreed to collaborate, somewhat grudgingly, and they were running new simulations daily. The results were promising: better recognition in low light conditions, fewer false positives, faster reaction times. We should run real-world tests, Miguel suggested during a team meeting. Controlled, but actual street conditions, not just the test track. That's expensive, Thomas said. We'd need permits, safety protocols, insurance. I can get it approved, Mason said, surprising himself. Everyone looked at him. Scarlett told me if we needed resources for the project, to ask. This qualifies. Thomas nodded slowly. All right, put together a proposal. Detail what you need, why you need it, projected timeline. I'll review it and we'll send it up the chain. Mason spent the next 2 days building the most detailed proposal of his life. Cost breakdowns, safety protocols, success metrics. When he finally emailed it to Thomas, he felt like he'd just submitted his engineering thesis all over again. Thomas approved it with minor changes, sent it to the next level up, who approved it and sent it to Scarlett. She called Mason directly. Real-world testing, ambitious. Too ambitious? No. Good ambitious. I'm approving the budget. When do you want to start? Next month if possible. Make it happen. And Mason? Yeah? This is exactly the kind of thinking I hired you for. Keep it up. After they hung up, Mason sat at his desk feeling something unfamiliar. Pride, maybe. The sense that he was actually good at this. That Scarlett's faith in him wasn't misplaced. Miguel appeared at his desk. Dude, did you just get the CEO to approve a 6-figure budget in one phone call? I guess. That's insane. Most proposals take months to get approved. Maybe mine was just really good. Or maybe she really trusts you. That night at dinner, actual dinner, chicken and vegetables that Mason had attempted to cook, and Chloe had diplomatically eaten, his daughter asked about his day. Good, we got approval for a big test. The pedestrian thing? You remember that? I remember everything. I'm observant. Right. I keep forgetting. Chloe pushed broccoli around her plate. Daddy, do you like your job? I do. Why? Because you smile more now. Before you looked tired all the time. Now you look happy tired. That's different. Mason felt his throat tighten. I didn't know you noticed that. I notice everything. She finally ate the broccoli. I'm glad you took the job, even though it was scary. Me too, sweet pea. And I'm glad we got the blueberry car. And I'm glad old grandpa is getting fixed. And I'm glad the superhero lady found you. That's a lot of glad. I have a lot of feelings. Later, after Chloe was asleep, Mason's phone rang. Scarlett. Am I calling too late? No, Chloe just went down. Good. Listen, I wanted to tell you something. The dealership incident, with Thornton and how you were treated, I've been thinking about it a lot. Okay? I've implemented new training protocols. Every employee, every dealership, everyone who interacts with customers, focused on respect, dignity, recognizing bias. It's called the READ protocol. Mason nearly dropped his phone. You named it after me? You're the reason it exists. Seemed appropriate. She paused. I wanted you to know that what happened to you mattered, that it changed things. Because sometimes when bad things happen, at least they can mean something. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. They talked for another hour. About work, about Chloe, about nothing important and everything important. Scarlett told him about growing up in foster care, fighting her way through business school, building the company from nothing. Mason told her about meeting Sarah, about the cancer diagnosis 3 months after their wedding, about the impossible choice between career and bedside. You chose right, Scarlett said quietly. I gave up everything. You chose love over ambition. That's not giving up. That's being human. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. You'd have climbed the corporate ladder and hated yourself. Trust me, I know. I spent years choosing ambition over everything else. It made me successful and miserable. She laughed softly. Then this mechanic pulled me out of a burning car and disappeared before I could say thank you. Spent a decade wondering what kind of person does that. Turns out, the kind who knows what actually matters. I'm not that noble. I loved her. I couldn't leave. That's what noble looks like, Mason. It's not grand gestures. It's showing up every day for the person you love, even when it costs everything. Mason's eyes were stinging. She would have liked you. Yeah? Yeah. She always said I needed someone to push me out of my comfort zone. You definitely do that. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? Right now, in this moment, are you happy? Mason thought about it honestly. The new job that challenged him. The daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall. The absence of constant financial terror. The slow rebuilding of a life that felt worth living. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Good. You deserve to be. 4 weeks after they'd taken the truck, Scarlett texted Mason a photo. The Dodge, fully restored, gleaming candy apple red in professional lighting, every dent gone, every scratch buffed out, new chrome, new tires, the interior visible through the windows looking immaculate. Ready for pickup this weekend. Want me to have it delivered, or do you want to pick it up? Mason stared at the photo. It looked brand new, better than new, like the truck he'd bought 15 years ago before life had beaten it into submission. I'll pick it up. Where? She sent an address. The restoration shop was an hour away, in a part of the city Mason rarely visited. He arranged to go Saturday morning, bringing Chloe because she'd insisted old Grandpa would want to see her first. The shop was enormous, filled with vehicles in various states of restoration. Classic cars, vintage trucks, projects that probably cost more than Mason's annual salary. His Dodge sat in the main bay looking completely out of place among the luxury restorations. Or maybe not out of place. Maybe exactly where it belonged. A technician walked them through everything that had been done. New engine with modern fuel injection, rebuilt transmission, completely refurbished suspension. The frame had been reinforced, rust removed, fresh paint applied in multiple coats. The interior was new leather, not original, but high quality, chosen to match the era. Ms. Vale was very specific about maintaining authenticity while improving reliability, the technician explained. This truck will run like new, but look period appropriate. Chloe climbed into the driver's seat, running her hands over the steering wheel. It smells different. New leather smell, Mason said. It'll fade. I like the old smell. It smelled like us. The truck is still us, Sweet Pea, just cleaner. They drove it home carefully, Mason hyper-aware of every sound, every response. It drove like a completely different vehicle, smooth, quiet, responsive. The engine started on the first try with a solid purr instead of the familiar grinding struggle. It was perfect. And somehow, that made Mason want to cry. Mrs. Chen was waiting when they pulled into the parking lot, having appointed herself the official welcoming committee. She walked around the truck 3 times, nodding approvingly. Very fancy now, like new truck. Same truck, Mason said. Just fixed. Same on inside, different on outside, like you. The observation hit deeper than it should have. That night, Mason stood in the parking lot looking at both vehicles, the Navigator and the Dodge, side by side, past and present, survival and stability, everything he'd fought for and everything he'd been given. His phone buzzed. Scarlett. How's old Grandpa? Perfect. Too perfect. I'm afraid to drive it. That's ridiculous. It's a truck. Drive it. What if something happens to it? Then we fix it again. Mason, it's not a museum piece. It's transportation. Use it. You spent a fortune restoring it. I spent a fortune making sure it lasts another 15 years. That only works if you actually drive it. A pause. Are you okay? You sound weird. Mason sat on the curb between both vehicles. I keep thinking about what you said, about being the same on the inside and different on the outside. I didn't say that, Mrs. Chen did. Right, but it's true. This truck, my job, even this conversation, everything looks different, but I'm still the same guy who couldn't afford lunch 4 months ago. No, you're not. Scarlett, you're not the same, Mason. The guy who couldn't afford lunch didn't believe he deserved better. You're starting to believe it. That's different. That matters. What if I stop believing it? What if I wake up one day and realize this was all a mistake? Then you'll deal with it. But you won't. You know why? Why? Because you're good at this. The engineering, the job, the life you're building. And somewhere deep down you know that. You're just scared to admit it because admitting it means accepting that you deserve good things. And that's terrifying. Mason closed his eyes. How are you always right about this stuff? Therapy? Lots of therapy. She laughed. Also, I spent 10 years being wrong about everything until I figured it out. You're getting the abbreviated version. Lucky me. Very lucky. Now go inside, hug your daughter, and stop overthinking. Yes, ma'am. And Mason? Yeah? Thank you. For letting me restore the truck, for taking the job, for being stubborn and difficult and making me work for every single thing. You're welcome? I mean it. Most people in your position would have taken everything I offered immediately. You made me prove it mattered. That means something. After they hung up, Mason sat for a while longer in the quiet parking lot. November had turned cold, proper winter announcing its intentions. In a few weeks it would snow, and he'd see how both vehicles handled the ice. But for now, everything was calm. Still, the kind of moment that felt important even if you couldn't articulate why. Eventually he went inside, checked on Chloe, asleep with her tablet still playing videos, and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The apartment looked the same as always, small, worn, familiar. But it didn't feel limiting anymore. It felt like home base. The place he came back to after days doing work that mattered, with people who respected him, for a company that valued what he brought. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Thomas. Real-world testing approved for December 15th. You'll be lead engineer on site. Congratulations. Mason stared at the message. Lead engineer. 4 months ago, he'd been changing oil and rotating tires. Now he was leading a major safety test for a billion-dollar company. He should have felt terrified. Instead, he felt ready. The test happened on a closed section of road outside the city, early morning before traffic. The setup took hours. Sensors, cameras, safety equipment, the test vehicle modified with their new detection system. Mason coordinated everything, checking and rechecking, making sure every variable was controlled. Scarlett showed up halfway through setup, surprising everyone. Just observing, she said when Thomas asked if she needed anything. This is important. I wanted to see it. She stood next to Mason while they ran the first test, a mannequin in dark clothing stepping into the road at dusk-level lighting. The vehicle detected it at 40 feet, began braking at 30, stopped with 10 feet to spare. Again, Mason said into his radio. Same scenario, add fog. They ran it 15 times with different variables. Rain, fog, darkness, multiple pedestrians, children, dogs. Every scenario they could imagine. The system caught 93%, far better than the old system's 68%. It's working, Rachel said, unable to hide her excitement. It's actually working. We need to test more scenarios, Mason said. But yeah, it's working. Scarlett caught his eye and smiled. Not her professional smile, something genuine. They wrapped up as the sun was setting, everyone exhausted but energized. The team went out for celebratory drinks. Mason begged off, had to get home to Chloe, but Scarlett walked him to his car. You did good today, she said. We did good. Team effort. You led the team. That's different than being part of it. Mason unlocked the navigator, then paused. Can I ask you something? Always. Why me? Really? Not the highway rescue? Not the qualifications? Why did you actually hire me? Scarlett leaned against the navigator, looking up at the darkening sky. You remember when I asked what you'd tell Chloe about that day at the dealership? You didn't ask that. I thought it, and I realized you'd tell her the truth, that sometimes people are cruel, that sometimes the world is unfair, but that you keep showing up anyway. Keep trying. Keep being decent even when decent isn't rewarded. She looked at him. I've spent 10 years building a company full of brilliant people, smart, talented, driven. But brilliant people sometimes forget about decency, about doing the right thing when nobody's watching. You don't forget that, ever. And I needed someone who wouldn't. That's a lot of pressure. You're handling it fine. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. I should get home, Mason said finally. Chloe will want to hear about the test. Give her my best. Mason got in the navigator, then rolled down the window. Scarlett? Yeah? Thank you for everything, for finding me, for the job, for believing in something I'd stopped believing in, which is that I could be more than just surviving. Scarlett's expression softened. You were always more than that, Mason. You just needed someone to remind you. Christmas came quietly that year. Mason and Chloe decorated their small apartment with lights from the dollar store and a tree that was slightly lopsided, but theirs. For the first time in 4 years, Mason wasn't worried about money, wasn't counting every dollar, wasn't skipping gifts because the budget wouldn't stretch. He bought Chloe the art supplies she'd been wanting, books, a bike with training wheels, things he'd always told himself next year, knowing next year never came. Christmas morning, she sat surrounded by presents with an expression of pure wonder. This is the best Christmas ever, she said. Better than last year? Last year you made me a dollhouse out of cardboard boxes. It was good, but this is better. Fair assessment. She hugged him fiercely. I love you, Daddy. Love you too, sweet pea. His phone rang. Scarlett. Merry Christmas, she said. Merry Christmas. You celebrating? Not really. Never been big on holidays, but I wanted to check in. Make sure you and Chloe were good. We're great. She's currently drowning in presents. Good. You deserve to spoil her a little. What are you doing today? A pause. Working, probably. Catching up on things. On Christmas? When you don't have family, holidays are just quiet work days. Mason made a decision. Come over. What? Come over. For dinner. It won't be fancy, but it'll be better than working. Mason, I can't intrude on your Christmas. You're not intruding. I'm inviting. Big difference. Another pause. Are you sure? Positive. Chloe would love to see you. And honestly, so would I. Okay, what time? 4? I'll be there. She showed up at 4 exactly, carrying 2 bags of groceries and looking uncertain in a way Mason had never seen. I didn't know what to bring, so I brought ingredients, and wine, and dessert, and I might have overdone it. Chloe appeared, saw Scarlett, and launched herself at her. You came. I did. Merry Christmas. Do you want to see my presents? I got so many presents. I'd love to. Mason watched Scarlett sit on the floor with Chloe, admiring art supplies and books with genuine interest, and felt something shift in his chest. This woman who ran a billion-dollar company, sitting cross-legged in his shabby apartment, listening to a 6-year-old explain the difference between various markers. They cooked dinner together. Well, Mason attempted to cook while Scarlett gently corrected everything he was doing wrong. It turned out she actually knew how to cook, something she'd learned from a foster mother who'd been kind to her. You never talk about your past, Mason observed while chopping vegetables under her supervision. Not much to talk about. Foster care until 18, worked my way through college, started at Vail as an intern, climbed the ladder. Pretty standard. Nothing about that is standard. Maybe not, but it is what it is. Do you ever talk to any of the foster families? 1. Mrs. Patterson. Not your Mrs. Patterson. Different one. She was good to me. We exchanged Christmas cards. Scarlett paused in her stirring. Everyone else was just doing a job. She actually cared. Like you care about your employees. I try. Doesn't always work, but I try. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Chloe told jokes she'd learned at school. Mason burned the rolls. Scarlett shared stories about the company's early days, when she'd been working 18-hour days just to keep things afloat. Why did you keep going? Mason asked. When it was that hard, why not quit? Because I didn't have anywhere to quit to. The company was everything. My home, my purpose, my proof that I mattered. She looked at him. That's probably unhealthy. Probably, but understandable. After dinner, after Chloe had fallen asleep on the couch clutching her new stuffed bear, Mason and Scarlett sat at the kitchen table with wine and quiet conversation. Thank you for inviting me, Scarlett said. This was better than working. You're welcome any time. Careful, I might take you up on that. Please do. Scarlett swirled her wine, looking thoughtful. Can I tell you something? Sure. When I first found you, in the dealership parking lot, I had this whole plan. I was going to thank you, offer you money, maybe set up a trust fund or something, close the loop, pay my debt, and move on. She looked up. But then I met you, met Chloe, saw what you'd built from nothing with nobody's help. And I realized paying you back wasn't about money. It was about seeing you actually get what you deserve. I have what I deserve. Good kid, decent life, work that matters. You have what you built despite everything trying to stop you. There's a difference. She reached across the table, put her hand over his. You saved my life, Mason. The least I can do is make sure yours is worth living. It was always worth living. I just forgot for a while. Then I'm glad I reminded you. They sat like that for a while, hands touching across the scratched kitchen table, comfortable in silence. Eventually, Scarlett left, thanking him again, promising to see him after the holidays. Mason watched her drive away in her expensive car, then looked at his apartment, small and worn and full of love, and felt something like contentment, maybe even happiness. Winter settled in properly after Christmas. The first real snow came in January, and Mason tested both vehicles in the weather. The Navigator handled like it was designed for it. The Dodge, freshly restored, actually performed better than when it was new. Work continued. The pedestrian detection system moved toward production. Mason got promoted to senior engineer, then team lead. Chloe started second grade and joined art club. Mrs. Chen taught them both how to make dumplings, with varying success. And slowly, over months of dinners and phone calls and shared moments, Mason and Scarlett became something more than employer and employee, more than rescuer and rescued. Just two people who'd found each other at the exact moment they both needed finding. It wasn't smooth. Scarlett worked too much. Mason overthought everything. They had their first fight about something stupid. Scarlett trying to buy Chloe an expensive birthday present, Mason insisting it was too much. They didn't talk for 3 days until Chloe called Scarlett herself and told her she was being dumb. "She said that?" Scarlett asked when she showed up at Mason's door to apologize. "She's very direct." "I noticed." They figured it out, learning each other's patterns, making space for complications, building something that looked nothing like either of them had expected but felt right anyway. 1 year after the dealership incident, Mason stood in his parking lot looking at both vehicles. The Navigator, still perfect, barely showing its age. The Dodge, gleaming red, looking like it could run forever. Chloe came out to find him. 7 now, growing so fast it hurt. "Why do you always stare at the cars, Daddy?" "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how much has changed in a year." Chloe leaned against his side. "Good changes?" "Yeah, really good changes." "Because of the superhero lady?" Mason smiled. "She helped, but mostly because you told me I was allowed to matter to other people." "I was right. I'm always right." "Yes, you are." "Yes, you?" They stood together in the winter evening, watching snow start to fall. Inside, Mason's phone was buzzing with a text from Scarlett asking if they wanted to come over for dinner. His life was full of possibilities now, full of connections and purpose and the slow rebuilding of hope. The truck had carried him through the worst. The SUV had given him safety. But what had really saved him was learning to accept help, to believe he deserved it, to understand that surviving and living were two different things, and he was finally doing the latter. "Come on," he told Chloe. "Let's go inside. We've got plans." "With Scarlett?" "With Scarlett." "Good. I like her. She makes you happy." "She does." "And she makes good mac and cheese. Better than yours." "Okay, rude but accurate." They walked inside together, leaving both vehicles in the parking lot. The past and the present, the struggle and the reward, everything that had brought them to this moment. And for the first time in 5 years, Mason Reed felt like he'd finally stopped running from grief and started walking toward something better. Not perfect. Never perfect. But his. And that, it turned out, was enough.